from a real-life plane crash that inspired a whole generation of movies. A flight that ended in a catastrophic crash upon landing. Even a plane that missed its turn when it started to take off. These are the top 7 plane moments so intense, you'll remember them forever. If you're eating while watching this video, enjoy. We'll start with an accident that inspired a movie saga, which many people don't know happened in real life. We're talking about the movie Final Destination and the story of TWA Flight 800.
On the night of July 17, 1996, the sky over Long Island, New York, lit up with an explosion that shook everyone nearby. Just 12 minutes after takeoff, the Trans World Airlines Boeing 747 exploded into a ball of fire in midair. Witnesses on the coast watched in horror as a gigantic explosion lit up the ocean. In just seconds, TWA Flight 800 went from a routine trip to one of aviation's most controversial tragedies. 230 people were aboard, never imagining that night would be the last of their lives. The shocking thing is that no one knew what had happened. Was it an attack, a missile, or something more sinister inside the plane itself? Emergency calls began to flood the radio frequencies, and within seconds, the news spread across the United States. A plane had exploded in mid-air. What happened next sparked theories, conspiracies, and an investigation that would last for years. And the most shocking thing, for months, no one was clear about what had really happened. In the next few minutes, you'll discover the truth behind TWA Flight 800. TWA Flight 800 took off from JFK Airport bound for Paris with 230 people on board. For many, it was the start of a dream vacation. For others, the long-awaited reunion with their families. But what no one knew was that many of those passengers had only 12 minutes left to live. In the cockpit, Captain Steven Snyder, with more than 17,000 flight hours, was accompanied by First Officer Stephen Epstein and Flight Engineer Oliver Crick, an experienced crew accustomed to crossing the Atlantic. It was a solid team prepared for any emergency, except the one that was about to happen. Meanwhile, the passengers settled into their seats, some flipping through magazines, others preparing for sleep. The atmosphere was completely normal. But beneath their feet, in the heart of the 747, a fuel tank was already turning into a time bomb. It's 8:31 p.m. TWA 800 is crossing the sky over Long Island when suddenly a brutal explosion rocks the Boeing 747. The plane becomes a fireball in midair. Witnesses on the coast describe an orange glow that lit up the night as if it were daytime. Some claim to have seen a flash, like a missile ascending seconds before the explosion. That image would fuel the most terrifying theories. The 747 begins to tear in two. The passenger cabin falls first, while the rest burns out of control on its way to the Atlantic. Imagine the scene. A giant plane splitting in the air and going down in flames in front of hundreds of witnesses. On the ground, the horror was indescribable. An entire plane had disappeared from the sky in a matter of seconds. What you will hear below is a dramatized reenactment of the CVR. Based on official transcripts, discretion is advised.
Checklist complete. Everything looks stable.
Speed and altitude climbing normally. Do you see that fuel flow indicator on engine 4? It's fluctuating a bit.
TWA 800, New York Center, radar contact, maintain presence at heading. Roger, main heading to heading 2A8,
The readings on number 4 are still unstable.
All right, keep monitoring it.
Wait, do you feel that? Oh, dentist stats. It's fluctuating a bit.
We've got a...
Minutes after the explosion, emergency radio was flooded with reports. Plane down, explosion in midair, multiple witnesses. Within hours, the news was on every network. A TWA Boeing 747 had exploded off the coast of New York. But the most disturbing thing was the eyewitness accounts. More than 200 people claimed to have seen a flash, like a missile rising into the sky, seconds before the explosion. Theories quickly multiplied. A terrorist attack? A military missile launched by mistake? Or a bomb hidden inside the plane? The mystery grew, and while the families of the victims demanded answers, the entire world was asking the same question. Had someone shot down the TWA-800? Or was the threat within the plane itself? The investigation was one of the longest and most complex in aviation history. More than 4 years were spent analyzing every piece of the plane, every testimony, and every hypothesis. For months, the entire country was convinced it had been an attack. But investigators began to see a different truth. Finally, the NTSB issued its final report in 2000 stating, "The probable cause of the accident of TWA Flight 800 was an explosion of the center fuel tank resulting from the ignition of flammable vapors within the tank. The most likely ignition source was an electrical short outside the tank that allowed sufficient energy to enter through associated electrical wiring. In other words, there was no missile, no bomb. What destroyed TWA 800 was an internal electrical spark. The tragedy, which many imagined to be an act of war, ended up being the result of a technical failure within the plane itself." As the world processed the official case, another inevitable question arose. Who would assume civil liability for the loss of 230 lives? Investigations pointed to an internal failure, and that paved the way for multi-million-dollar lawsuits against TWA and Boeing. The airline agreed to compensate the families, and Boeing, the manufacturer of the 747, reached confidential settlements with several victims. But money didn't heal the pain. Some family members declared, "None of this will bring back those we love. All we ask is that this never happens again." Others demanded urgent changes, better maintenance, safer electrical systems, less vulnerable tanks. Each voice was a reminder that behind the numbers lay broken stories. This episode made it clear that when an airline tragedy occurs, the truth doesn't end with the technical report. It also involves facing accountability, healing wounds, and ensuring that the sacrifice of so many lives was not in vain. TWA Flight 800 reminds us that behind every number and every headline, there are lives, dreams, and entire families. Thanks to this tragedy, the industry implemented stricter controls on electrical systems and fuel tank ventilation, reducing the risk of something like this happening again. As one family member said, "We can't change the past, but we can demand a safer future." Every lesson written in pain is also a legacy of protection for those who today entrust their lives to heaven.
If you think this accident was catastrophic, the next one changed the history of aviation when, upon landing, the plane crashed directly onto the highway. We're talking about the story of the Flydubai Boeing 737 flight.
3:40 in the morning. The sky above Rostov-on-Don is pitch black, cloaked in storm clouds and battered by gusts of over 60 kilometers per hour. A Flydubai Boeing 737 with 62 people on board aligns with the runway. They've already tried once. It didn't work. They've spent more than 2 hours circling in the sky, waiting for the right moment to land. Now, they're going to try again. The plane begins its final descent. The wind shakes the fuselage. Visibility is near zero. Suddenly, a warning blares in the cockpit. Pull up! Pull up! And in an instant, the aircraft plunges nose first toward the ground at over 600 kilometers per hour. There was no time to react, no second chance. What happened to Flydubai Flight 981 wasn't a technical failure. It was a silent tragedy, built in the sky, minute by minute. What caused an experienced crew flying a perfectly functional aircraft to crash just meters from the runway after nearly 3 hours in the air? This is the story of the Flydubai Boeing 737 flight. Are you ready? Let's get started. On March 19, 2016, Flydubai Flight 981 took off from Dubai, headed to Rostov-on-Don, a city in southwestern Russia. It was a nighttime, low-cost flight with 62 people on board, 55 passengers and 7 crew members. At the controls, Captain Aristos Sokratus, an experienced pilot from Cyprus with over 5,700 flight hours. Beside him, First Officer Alejandro Oliva Cruz from Spain, young but well-trained and capable. Both men were familiar with this route. They had flown it many times before. The aircraft was a Boeing 737-800 in excellent condition, just 5 years old. Everything was routine: the flight plan, the departure, the onboard systems. But there was one threat they couldn't control: the weather at their destination. And from the very beginning, they knew this night wouldn't be easy. At 1:30 a.m., Flydubai 981 begins its final approach to Rostov-on-Don Airport. But from the cockpit, the view is disturbing. Strong crosswinds, heavy rain, and low clouds reduce visibility to almost zero. The runway appears and disappears, the aircraft shakes, landing gear is down, and just 340 meters above ground, the pilots decide to abort the landing. They perform what's called a go-around. In aviation, a go-around is not an emergency. It's a safe, even routine decision when landing conditions aren't stable. But here's the problem: the weather won't improve, and there are no nearby airports with better conditions. So Flight 981 climbs again and starts circling above Rostov, waiting. What no one knows yet is that this wait will mark the beginning of the end. Minutes after the go-around, Flight 981 remains in a holding pattern, circling above Rostov-on-Don. The wind doesn't let up, the rain keeps falling, visibility stays near zero. Other aircraft make a different call. They divert to alternate airports, but Flydubai 981 keeps waiting. What initially seemed like a tactical decision soon turns into a psychological strain. The crew has now spent over 2 hours in the air with no clear outcome. Fatigue begins to set in, and here comes a silent enemy: exhaustion. Studies have shown that fatigue can reduce a pilot's reaction time as much as alcohol. After hours of nighttime flight, intense focus, and non-stop stress, the mind wears down, reflexes dull, judgment weakens. No one on board realizes it, but they are getting dangerously close to the moment when good decisions stop being made, and the worst is still ahead. But before continuing, if you like this video, please subscribe. It will help me a lot. 3:40 a.m. After nearly 3 hours in the air, the pilots of Flight 981 decide to try one more time. The second approach begins with careful maneuvers, but the wind is still fierce and visibility hasn't improved. At about 220 meters above ground, the aircraft begins to destabilize. It drifts slightly off course. The crew decides to abort the landing again. They initiate a go-around. The captain pushes the throttles to full power, but makes a fatal mistake. Unknowingly, he pulls back sharply on the controls, raising the nose far beyond what the aircraft can handle. The Boeing 737 pitches up aggressively, loses speed, and drops nose first. Within seconds, the aircraft transitions from climbing to falling, almost vertically. It hits the ground at over 600 kilometers per hour. The plane disintegrates on impact. There are no survivors. It all happened in less than 20 seconds. And in that brief window, there was no time to fix it, no time to even understand it. It was a moment, as brutal as it was irreversible.
The investigation after the crash found no technical faults in the aircraft, no maintenance issues, no system failures. The Boeing 737 was working perfectly. What happened that morning was a tragic case of human error, triggered by a silent mix of factors: extreme fatigue, growing tension, hostile weather, and a cockpit where, under pressure, decisions stopped being clear. In the final seconds, the captain correctly initiated a go-around, but performed the maneuver with excessive nose-up angle. The aircraft climbed too steeply, lost speed, and fell. Neither he nor his co-pilot had time to react. Investigators concluded that spatial disorientation also played a key role. In darkness, storm, and exhaustion, the brain can lose track of what's up and what's down. And when that happens 300 meters from the ground, the margin for error vanishes. Flydubai Flight 981 left a painful lesson that in aviation, the biggest threat isn't always mechanical. Sometimes, it lives in the tired mind of the person flying the plane. Today, a monument in Rostov-on-Don bears the names of the 62 souls who never came home. Because one night, circling over an impossible runway, the sky became their cage, and the earth their fate. And in that instant, everything changed forever. But if you think this accident was unfortunate, the next one will surprise you even more. Because this plane suffered a catastrophe just minutes from landing, which was captured on video. We're talking about the story of United Airlines Flight 232. A crippled DC-10 struggles to stay in the air. No hydraulic controls, no way to turn like a normal plane. On board, 296 souls depend on something that has never been tried before in aviation history. Below, at Sioux City Airport, dozens of emergency vehicles await a landing that could end in total catastrophe.
Roger, sir. Yeah, that's a closed runway. That'll work, sir. We're getting the equipment off the runway, and they'll line up for that one. How long is it? 6,600 feet, 6,600, and the equipment's coming off. Isolate this.
The aircraft approaches at high speed, wobbly. Impact is inevitable. But how did they get here? What happened at 37,000 feet that left this giant aircraft out of control? In the next few minutes, you'll hear the incredible and devastating story of United Airlines Flight 232. July 19, 1989, Denver Airport. United Airlines Flight 232 prepares to depart for Chicago. On board are 296 people, families, business travelers, children, all confident this will be a routine flight. None of them could imagine that within an hour, this plane would be written into history. The DC-10 lifts off normally, climbing into a perfect blue sky. The engines roar, passengers settle in, some read, some chat. But something unseen is traveling with them, a hidden defect in the tail engine, silently deteriorating for years. What no one knows is that this flaw will seal the fate of everyone on board. At 15:16 p.m., while cruising at 37,000 feet, the unthinkable happens. Engine number 2, mounted on the tail of the DC-10, explodes catastrophically. Shards of metal rip through the aircraft like invisible blades. The worst part isn't losing the engine, it's what comes with it. The debris severs all 3 hydraulic lines that move the wings and tail. In seconds, the aircraft is left with no flight controls. In the cockpit, the pilots pull on the yokes, but nothing responds. This giant of over 160 tons is now without rudder, without ailerons, without stabilizers. In the entire history of aviation, no aircraft in this condition had ever landed successfully. But before continuing with this story, if you like it, please subscribe. It would help me a lot to continue growing. Now, let's continue. In the cockpit, confusion reigns. The controls are dead. The massive aircraft simply won't respond. But Captain Al Haynes and his crew refuse to give up. They discover something incredible. By increasing power on one engine and reducing it on the other, the plane turns slightly. It isn't graceful, it isn't precise, but it's all they've got. Using only the engines, they manage to keep the aircraft in a fragile balance, but every maneuver is violent. The DC-10 lurches, climbs, and dives like a wounded bird struggling to stay aloft. On board, passengers feel the chaos. Some pray, others write farewell notes. The flight attendants, bravely, prepare for an emergency landing they know might be their last. And with every passing minute, the aircraft draws closer to its only hope, Sioux City. The DC-10 approaches Sioux City. There's no margin for error, no second chances. It's all or nothing. From the control tower, they watch in horror as the plane descends, wobbling, dangerously tilted to one side. The pilots do the impossible, using only the engines to line up with the runway. On board, the tension is unbearable. Passengers squeeze hands. Some cry silently. Captain Haynes gives the final instruction: brace for impact. The aircraft slams into the runway, but instantly the right wing collapses. The DC-10 careens violently, skidding out of control before erupting in a fireball. Wreckage scatters across the nearby fields. Emergency crews rush toward the scene. Amid smoke, fire, and screams, the desperate search for survivors begin. What you are about to hear is a recording and the actual video of the accident. Discretion is advised.
Roger, sir. Yeah, that's a closed runway. That'll work, sir. We're getting the equipment off the runway, and they'll line up for that one. How long is it? 6,600 feet, 6,600, and the equipment's coming off. Isolate this.
The impact was devastating, but against all odds, 185 people survived. Amid fire and wreckage, firefighters and volunteers risked their lives to save those who still breathed. The crash of United Airlines Flight 232 is remembered not only for the tragedy, but also for the extraordinary skill of the crew. Captain Al Haynes and his co-pilots turned the impossible into a chance for survival. The investigation revealed that a hidden engine flaw had destroyed all hydraulic systems, something never anticipated in aviation. From then on, the industry learned that even the unthinkable must be prepared for. For the survivors, that day marked a turning point. For the world, it was a reminder that even in the face of disaster, courage and humanity can bring a glimmer of hope. Because this is not just the story of an air crash, it's the story of a fight against the impossible. But if you think this accident was horrible, the next one is worse. Because this plane, seconds after takeoff, lost its engine due to a technical maintenance error, creating a huge accident. We're talking about the story of American Airlines Flight 191. A deafening roar shatters the air. In broad daylight, an American Airlines DC-10 loses its left engine during climb-out. The massive metal cylinder tears away from the wing, ripping cables, hydraulic lines, and any hope for a safe flight. In the control tower, controllers watch in horror as the aircraft banks dangerously, its left wing seemingly dragging it down.
Mayday, Mayday, Flight 305, we have an engine failure, requesting emergency landing.
In the cockpit, the captain and crew fight against a machine that no longer responds. But how did a flight, departing with 271 souls in perfect weather, reach this moment of absolute chaos? In the next few minutes, you'll hear the full story of American Airlines 191, the deadliest aviation accident on U.S. soil. It's May 25th. 1979, O'Hare International Airport, Chicago. American Airlines Flight 191 is preparing for its route to Los Angeles. The weather is perfect. Families wave goodbye with smiles, and the pilots review final checklists before takeoff. But no one, not in the terminal, not in the cockpit, Not even in the maintenance team suspects that in the left wing, engine number 1 hides a deadly trap. A vital component damaged days earlier during improper maintenance is about to fail, and when it does, there will be no way to stop what's coming. In the next few minutes, this routine flight will become the deadliest air disaster in U.S. history. Days before the flight, the DC-10's left engine had been removed for maintenance. But the method used wasn't the one recommended by the manufacturer. Instead of disassembling it piece by piece, the engine and its pylon were removed together using a crane. This caused invisible microfractures in the structure that attached it to the wing. No one saw them, no one looked for them, but the damage was there, just waiting for the force of takeoff to finish the job. And despite everything, that day, at 3:02 p.m., American Airlines Flight 191 is cleared for takeoff. The roar of the 3 engines shatters the quiet at O'Hare as the massive DC-10 begins its charge down the runway. The aircraft gains speed, the landing gear lifts from the asphalt, and then it happens. With a deafening metallic blast, the left engine tears completely away from the wing. The violent separation also rips away critical hydraulic and electrical lines, stripping control from the left wing. From the tower, controllers watch as the plane banks dangerously. In the cockpit, the captain fights to correct, but the DC-10 has already lost its deadly balance. In just 31 seconds after losing the engine, Flight 191's fate is sealed. At over 270 knots, the plane slams into an open field, barely 1.5 miles from the runway. The explosion is immediate. A fireball engulfs everything in its path. 273 lives are lost in what would become the deadliest air disaster in U.S. history. What you are about to hear is an actual recording of the black box at the time of the accident. Viewer discretion is advised. But first, if you are enjoying this video, please subscribe. It would help me a lot to continue growing. Now, let's go with the recording. In a matter of seconds, American Airlines Flight 191 ceased to exist. The investigation revealed that the cause was a structural failure caused by an improper maintenance method that had damaged the engine's pylon. The tragedy led to immediate changes in maintenance procedures and stricter inspections across the industry. But for the 273 families who lost loved ones, no technical improvement could ever fill the void. Today, a small memorial near O'Hare Airport honors those who departed on that sunny day, reminding us that in aviation, even the smallest error can have irreversible consequences. But the next accident you'll see wasn't caused by human or technical error, but by Mother Nature herself, when several lightning bolts struck an airplane in mid-flight. We're talking about the story of Pan Am Flight 214. Our third story takes us to December 8, 1963, a cold winter night along the east coast of the United States. Pan Am Flight 214, a Boeing 707, was on the final stretch of its journey toward Philadelphia. Inside the cabin, passengers were relaxed, reading magazines, chatting quietly, and preparing to land soon. Some were thinking about the holidays, just 2 weeks away. Everything seemed routine. Everything seemed normal. Until the weather began to turn. A line of storms had formed over the region. Strong winds, cold rain, and a heavy electrical buildup in the clouds. Air traffic control delayed several aircraft, including Pan Am 214, forcing them to circle in holding patterns while waiting for permission to land. The passengers had no idea that every extra minute in that storm was bringing the plane closer to disaster. Lightning danced across the sky. The aircraft rocked gently from the turbulence. In the cockpit, the crew monitored their instruments, aware of the storms but confident in the aircraft's capabilities. The Boeing 707 was a powerful machine, built to withstand harsh conditions. But this storm carried something far more dangerous than the crew could have imagined. Something hidden, silent, and lethal. As Pan Am 214 circled in the darkness, a bolt of lightning struck the aircraft's left wing. At first, it seemed like any other lightning strike, bright, loud, and startling. But this one hit a deadly spot. It ignited fuel vapors inside the wing's tank. In an instant, an explosion ripped through the wing, tearing it apart. The passengers felt a violent jolt as the aircraft began losing control. Fire illuminated the night sky. The Boeing 707, once stable and graceful, was now falling. Inside the cabin, chaos erupted. The aircraft rolled, descending rapidly. The crew had no chance to recover. Half the wing had been blown apart. Nearby residents looked up into the stormy sky and saw the horrifying shape of a burning aircraft spiraling toward the ground. Seconds later, the plane slammed into a field near Elkton, Maryland, erupting into flames. The impact and explosion were so powerful that debris scattered over a wide area. There were no survivors. The holiday season for dozens of families was shattered forever. And across the nation, people were stunned that lightning, something so common, could bring down a modern jetliner. Investigators found that static electricity and lightning had ignited vapors inside the wing. This discovery changed aviation forever. New fuel tank safety systems were mandated, better lightning protection standards were created, and aircraft design evolved to prevent such a tragedy from ever happening again. Pan Am 214 became the reason the world learned how lightning interacts with aircraft and how to defend against it. But if you think that accident was horrible, the next one surpasses it. Since due to human error, the pilot didn't notice he was running out of fuel and consequently created a huge accident. We're talking about the story of United Airlines Flight 173. United Airlines Flight 173 was nearing Portland on a cold December evening in 1978. Passengers relaxed as the aircraft began its descent, expecting to land within minutes. But just as the crew extended the landing gear, something felt wrong. A loud thud echoed through the cabin, followed by unusual vibration. The landing gear light, the small, simple confirmation that the gear had locked, did not illuminate. The crew suddenly had a potential gear failure, and tensions spread through the cockpit. Instead of continuing the approach, the captain entered a holding pattern to diagnose the issue. The passengers felt the aircraft circling over the dark suburbs of Portland, unaware of the growing stress behind the cockpit door. The crew lowered the gear again, checked circuit breakers, and tried visual confirmation, but the indicator stayed dark. Every minute that passed increased the uncertainty. The aircraft circled, engines humming steadily, while the pilots focused entirely on the landing gear problem. But as they concentrated on this single issue, a far deadlier problem crept in unnoticed. The aircraft had been in the air far longer than planned. Fuel continued to burn, dropping lower and lower. A flight engineer repeatedly mentioned the decreasing levels, but the captain, fixated on the landing gear, believed they still had time. Outside the windows, the city lights shimmered beneath them, unaware of the emergency unfolding above. Then came the moment of truth. One by one, the engines began to flame out. First one, then another. The cockpit filled with warnings. The crew realized the horrifying truth. They were out of fuel. With almost no thrust left, the aircraft descended rapidly. The passengers felt the terrifying silence of engines winding down. The ground rose quickly in the darkness as the pilots tried desperately to reach the airport. But they didn't make it. United Flight 173 crashed into a wooded suburban neighborhood just miles from the runway. Houses shook from the impact. Emergency crews raced to the scene as flames consumed parts of the aircraft. Many passengers survived thanks to the crew's attempt to soften the descent, but several lives were lost, and the tragedy shocked the nation. Investigators later concluded that the root cause was not mechanical failure. It was human factors. The landing gear had actually deployed correctly. The indicator bulb was simply burned out. Instead of balancing tasks and monitoring fuel, the captain became entirely absorbed in troubleshooting. This accident exposed the profound dangers of fixation on a single issue while ignoring the overall situation. The aviation industry responded with one of the most important reforms in history: crew resource management. Pilots were retrained to communicate clearly, challenge decisions when necessary, and share responsibility in the cockpit. United 173 became the case that forever changed cockpit culture, ensuring that no pilot ever flies alone in their decision-making again.
And finally, I want to tell you about one of the accidents that shocked one of the safest countries in the world. We're talking about the Netherlands, and the story of AI Flight 1862. On a quiet evening over the suburbs of Amsterdam, residents noticed an unusual sound in the sky, an engine rumbling far louder than normal. That sound came from a Boeing 747 cargo aircraft operated by El Al, climbing after takeoff from Schiphol Airport. Just minutes into the flight, disaster struck. The aircraft's right side engines, number 3 and 4, detached completely from the wing after a catastrophic pylon failure. Pilots felt the huge jolt, alarms lit up, and the jet began rolling violently to the right. Trying to regain control, the crew declared an emergency, requesting an immediate return to the airport. For several tense minutes, they fought a losing battle against asymmetric lift, hydraulic problems, and decreasing speed. The aircraft descended lower and lower until, with no control left, it rolled almost fully onto its side and slammed into the Bijlmermeer residential complex. The impact destroyed 2 apartment buildings and caused a massive fireball visible across the city. Investigators later uncovered a chain of failures. The primary cause was a structural fatigue crack inside the engine pylon's fuse pin, a component designed to attach the engines to the wings securely. When the fuse pin failed, the first engine tore away, ripping off hydraulic lines and damaging the attachment of the second engine, which separated moments later. This kind of dual engine separation was considered almost impossible at the time, but the findings exposed a hidden vulnerability in the design used on many earlier Boeing 747 models. As a result, global aviation authorities ordered extensive inspections and redesigns of engine pylons, leading to important safety changes across fleets worldwide. And that is the story of El Al Flight 1862, one of the most tragic and consequential accidents in Dutch aviation history. Thank you so much for watching. Your support truly helps this channel grow. If you enjoyed this video or learned something new, please consider subscribing, leaving a like, and sharing it with someone who loves aviation stories. I appreciate you being here, and I'll see you in the next video.